All right, thanks for, again, thanks for being patient on that. My name is Brent White, and I'm going to talk to you today about hacking web apps. And this is more kind of an intro for people that are interested in getting an InfoSec, or if you're a developer and want to learn how to secure your own code or anything like that. This is geared towards helping you get started. It also shows what I do as a pen tester from client kickoff call all the way to report delivery. And again, because of time constraints, I'm going to have to keep certain things high level, but this will give you the groundwork, to go Google and figure out where you need to, what tools you need to start learning, and just basically the path to take. Okay, so the very first thing we do with the client, we have a kickoff call, and this is where we figure out the rules of the engagement. We also figure out what the scope is. When can we scan? Is it okay if we look at this application 24/7, or if it's in production, maybe they only want testing on off hours so we're not messing up anything. The scope, okay, what's the URL or whatever the application is, so we make sure that we're actually hitting the right thing. And then in case something does go wrong, if we do break it, or we actually have denial of service or something, we need to have the points of contact that we can call and say, hey, sorry, it's 3 a.m., but we broke your stuff. And then hopefully that doesn't happen very often. Evidence gathering. So when you're doing these assessments, keep in mind that a report is expected at the end. So the more evidence you gather going through, the much easier it's going to make your life when you've got to start writing the report. When I first started as a pen tester doing this stuff, there were a few assessments at the beginning where they had already shut off access, and I didn't get good enough screenshots, or I didn't capture the correct get and post requests. And I knew there was vulnerability, but I had to go to them and ask them for temporary access so that I could get the right documentation. And of course, that's kind of embarrassing and not very professional. So just make sure that you're recording as much evidence as you can. Evidence gathering. So what do I use to keep everything that I find? There's so many tools out there that you can use that are free. The things that I like to use personally is KeepNote. It comes pre-installed in Cali, however you want to say it. It also has an installer for the Mac OS and for Windows, so it's pretty compatible with everything. Another cool thing I like about it is if the client wants to see all of your raw notes outside of the report, you can easily export everything as an HTML file, and so they can see, anything as long as they have a web browser. How do I group my information? So there's a couple different ways, and the more you do this, the more you'll figure out what works best for you. But what I found works best for me, if I have several applications that I'm working on for a single client, I might group the vulnerability by the host or IP. That way I can break it out per application. Or if it's just a handful or a single application, I'll just document it by vulnerability. And as you can see, the different color coding, the green, I guess, would be my references, such as the scope or credentials that they've provided me, so I know that I can just sort of ignore those when I'm reporting. The darker red, those would be your criticals, and the red would be your serious or high, and so on. So that, to me, that's just a personal preference, and it's just a quick visual reference as to what I found and to how the assessment's going so far. What do you document? What is considered evidence? So anything, you heard me talk earlier about the get, or the post request and the response. Anything that you're sending to the application that is vulnerable, make sure that you are documenting what you're sending as well as the response. Clients like to see not only just a cool screenshot, like if you get a cross-site scripting, don't just show the pop-up with the one or XSS dialog. Make sure that you're actually showing them, hey, this is what I sent, this was the parameter that was vulnerable, and here's the response. Another pro tip that I've actually seen some consultants get into some deep water over, don't ever share a screenshot of a cool hack that you did for a client. it's not a good idea, and you're probably under some sort of a non-disclosure agreement anyway. So just brag to that with your friends that maybe you work with or that you can trust, or sanitize it. Make sure that you get relevant, legible screenshots of the vulnerability. I've seen a few reports come through our QA process where you couldn't really tell exactly what it was that they were trying to call out in the screenshot. So make sure that you are zooming in and actually showing, hey, this is where the problem is, if it's not obvious. Here's an example, a SQL dump for an assessment that I did. I wanted to really show the information, but obviously if I were to take this large image and throw it in a report and had to shrink it down, you wouldn't really be able to read it. So what you have to do is figure out, just take areas that are really just going to show the importance of the vulnerability you found. Zoom in and make sure that it's legible. And again, you heard me talk about the HTTP request and response. Here's an example. This is sort of how I document code in a report, and you can see the highlighted part was what I actually sent to find SQL injection vulnerability. So when it's highlighted like that, it calls it out easily for whoever's looking at the report. They can easily see what the problem is and try and replicate it themselves. If you do find a vulnerability, make sure you're testing all parameters in an application. Don't just find a vulnerability in one parameter and then move on to something else. Make sure you're looking at every parameter. And say if you do find SQL injection, make sure that you are testing that on all parameters and then document every single parameter in your report that's vulnerable. That way the client isn't saying, well, how about the password parameter or email parameter, are those vulnerable too? If you can't answer that, it looks like you didn't do a thorough job. So methodologies are a great thing to have to go by, such as OWASP's web app methodology. These are just a good list to help keep you on track. So, especially as a pen tester, we do several assessments, basically one right after another. And so this is a good way to make sure, for me to make sure that I'm looking at each different section or different level of the application. I guess it's sort of a guideline. And just something I want to mention too is don't limit yourself to the methodology. If there's something that's not listed in there that should be added, or just check that too. But again, methodologies are a good guideline. Something that we always do whenever a client sends us an application, let's say for example if it's Acme Bank, what we'll do is we'll use open source intelligence and we'll go through and we'll search acmebank.com or email at acmebank.com, whatever the email address is or the website or anything. And what we'll do is we'll go through and search and try to find any sensitive information. This helps you to determine if the client has already been breached. If there's a previous hack, then you can find credentials or information on that and you can notify them. And by doing this, I've actually found database types, I've found entire database schemas. I've also found test accounts that were posted on a development help forum that were still active. So if you're going to go use a development forum to get help, make sure you sanitize your stuff. Don't give the real database name or the real table names. And if you give someone that's going to help you a test account, make sure when they're done you disable it, because we've actually been able to leverage that quite a few times. What do we use for open source intelligence? There's so many tools. Google's a great tool. Then you have things like Discover by Lee Baird. It just has many options that are built into it to help you get through this part of the assessment pretty quick. Okay, automated scanning. Why do you use automated scanning? You're supposed to be a hacker. Well, there's several reasons why. Again, as I mentioned, as a pen tester, you usually do several assessments back to back. And automated scanners are good for covering a wide range of things very quickly. And they're good at finding as what you might call low-hanging fruit. However, a vuln scan is not a penetration assessment. It's a vuln scan. So, what does that mean? It means that it's just quickly scanning. It doesn't do really much of the interaction and things that a human can do, so don't rely on it. And to those that say a vuln scan is a pen test, there you go. So again, with automated scanners, you have to verify the results. Don't trust them because they're not perfect, right? They're good at finding certain things quickly, but don't trust them. So, for example, if it responds that there's cross-site scripting vulnerability or something, make sure you go check that. See what it sent, replay the request, and see if it's legitimate. If it is, how much further can you take that vulnerability? If it's not, then mark it a false positive and move on. Some more automated scanners. Again, there's so many of them out there, but I'm sort of listing the ones that I use on a regular basis. Nessus is a great scanner. IBM AppScan, I use that on a regular basis too. It's really good at doing deep dives on applications. Burp Suite Pro, you're going to hear me mention Burp Suite Pro quite a few times. And then NIC2, NIC2 is actually built into Cali already. You can also install it on whatever other distro you have. This is, again, it's a quick little automated scanner. It's good for scanning default like admin folders or backup files. It's good for looking for basic CGI vulnerabilities and so on. So it's just a good time saver. Frameworks, I love frameworks. Whenever a client gives me an application and it's built on WordPress or Cold Fusion or Joomla or Drupal or anything like that, it makes me very happy because I know it's going to be a fun assessment. Things like WP Scan, those are available and they're geared specifically for frameworks like WordPress, for example. It'll go through and enumerate the version that's installed. It'll enumerate any plugins that they have, so you can search and see if there are known exploits for those plugins. And you can also enumerate usernames, which will help you, try to brute force the login. OWASP Dirbuster, that's a good one to use too. It's pretty time consuming, but basically it will go through and scan for any folders, commonly named folders. There are huge lists for folder names, or you can actually do a true brute force for not only folders, but for files as well. And by using this tool, several times I have found backup SQL database files that I could just pull down because they weren't, behind any sort of authentication. They just renamed the file name and thought that security by obscurity was a good idea, and that's not a good idea. So this helps find those things. Again, many more options installed in Cali. I'm not quite sure what the menu layout is in the new version, but in the last version of Cali, this menu layout is where you would find the vulnerability scanners. And then, of course, others like Saint and Nexpose. Okay, so a few pro tips for automated scanning. Don't just open the scanner and put in the URL and click go. You're taking a chance if you do that. You need to look at the application and see, okay, does this host handle a good amount of traffic? Kind of test it a little bit and see, if you have it wide open, is it going to kill the host? Are you going to knock something over? Make sure that you don't have denial of service checks available on certain hosts. Certain clients will request that you don't. Some don't really care. And again, as I mentioned, the number of threads at a time, you don't want to flood the host. During the kickoff call, it's always important to ask the client, hey, are there any pages or parameters or functions that you want us to avoid with the automated scanning? Oftentimes you'll find that there's a contact page or maybe a sign-up form that it's okay if you test manually, but if an automated scanner hits it, it's going to flood it and put thousands of requests into their database, and then some guys got to go clean that up, and then they're usually not too happy about that. Again, if it's a test environment, it's not production, they usually don't care. But if you are testing in a production environment, just make sure that you ask those things and then go and put those exceptions in the scanner. And then once you've configured everything and you're ready to go, then hit start. Manual testing. I wish I had a little bit more time to dig deeper into manual testing, but again, we're kind of going back to the scanner results. So as I mentioned before, anything that an automated scanner gives you, make sure that you're going through and manually verifying those. So if it says that there's, again, cross-site scripting vulnerability or something, instead of just documenting a 1 prompt or something like that, can you do remote file inclusion? Can you actually bring in a malicious JavaScript and start keylogging? How far can you take that? So make sure that with manual testing, you're really trying to leverage these things as much as possible. Explore the application. Again, don't just rely on the automated scanner to do it. Put it through a proxy like, again, Burp Suite Pro or OWASP Zap Proxy, or there's several others out there, to make sure that you're trying to get a very accurate view of the application. So you want to spider it, you want to go through and there's a content discovery option on Burp Suite Pro that it will take known names of URLs and things that it's already found and see if it can sort of brute force more information that might not necessarily be linked in the pages that's pulled down already. Review the server response. Most of the time, the reply will actually show you what version it's running, whether it's Apache or IIS and the version number. And sometimes you'll find that they're very verbose, and that can help you tailor your exploits and your attack a little bit more. Parameters, I mentioned earlier, make sure you're testing all parameters in an application. If there are several, just make a list. Copy them down, make a list to make sure that you're hitting each one. That way you can, give the client a thorough assessment. Again, here's just a quick and dirty list of things to check for. Cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, SQL and LDAP injection, local and remote file inclusions. Those are all things that are great attacks. They're still very relevant, and you still find quite a few of these in every assessment that I do, unfortunately. Let's see. Okay, so is sensitive information being passed through GET requests instead of POST? There are quite a few applications I've seen where they actually cached a page to the browser with the URL that had the username and the password, or user ID or something that could be leveraged. And so while compromising that machine and doing some simple forensics, then I've been able to gather credentials for an application. So you want to make sure that any sensitive information is actually being sent through POST requests. Look at the source code. It's incredible how many freebies, if you want to call them, I've actually found in source code comments from developers talking to each other, saying, hey, this causes the bug. Let's fix this in whatever version, test with this account. And so right there, they told me what the bug was, and they gave me credentials to log in and test. And all of this was found as an unauthenticated user. So, you just kind of want to comb over. It's a little time consuming, but comb over each page, look at the response for each page, and sometimes you'll find some good information. Now to prevent death by PowerPoint for a second. Happy dog. No. All right. A few more things. Authentication, can it be bypassed or broken? Going back to finding things in the source code. So there are so many times, again, the obscurity or security by obscurity, where they'll utilize JavaScript to hide admin links. So if your username isn't an admin, it won't show you on the screen the admin links. But if you look in the code, the admin links are right there. And so can you go to those and still see them even though you're not an admin level user? Can you see those things as an unauthenticated user? So you want to make sure to test it from as an authenticated and an unauthenticated user and see the links and things that you find, what can you get to that you're not supposed to see? Again, instead of looking specifically or just focusing on the application itself, look at the host that it's on. There have been times where the host has been outdated, unpatched, and we've been able to leverage some of those exploits and gain root to the box. So check that as well. I know Nessus is a good scanner for that, or just looking at it yourself. Look at the response to see what version the server is running, and then again use search exploit or something to find any known exploits to try and leverage that. Admin portals. Again, I talked about the admin links. Are there admin portals available? Something that you can brute force, maybe like Tomcat or something, cPanel, so many things you can look at. Again, are they vulnerable to directory traversal? Are they using dangerous HTTP methods? There have been a handful of times where they've had put and delete enabled. So I was able to throw up a laudanum script, a PHP script or ASP, and the antivirus didn't catch it, and there I had, basically shelled to that box just from crafting a put request. And then when I was done, utilized the delete method and took it off there. So if you do something like that and you're not able to remove it yourself, make sure you keep a note of it to let the client know, hey, I threw this shell up there, I can't take it off, so you guys need to clean that up. It's better for you to tell them instead of a year later when some guy's going through and like, hey, what's this shell script that's on there? Look and see what ports, what services are open with using something like Nmap. SSL TLS, you want to see what cipher suites they have enabled. Are they still using SSL 1 or 2 or TLS 1.0 or some weak cipher suites? So these are things that you can check, and you want to let them know what they need to get rid of, what they need to enable or disable. And then again, as I mentioned, look at your methodologies. There's a lot to look at. It can kind of be overwhelming, especially if you're just getting into this. And so that's a good way to help keep you on track. And make your own notes. Something that I do, because I'm not very smart, so I don't really remember commands and stuff really well. So I have a gigantic cheat sheet, I guess you call it, that I've made using Keep Note, or I've broken things down by vulnerability or by tool, so I can just go reference those and try those things over and over again on different assessments. So just keep practicing, figure out what the best way is for your notes, and then when you're ready, you can go hack some websites. How are we doing on time? Good? Cool. So I want to leave, make sure to leave some time open for Q&A. If anybody has any questions or anything, let me know, or we can talk afterwards if you like. But again, I know that's a lot of info, and I'm trying to keep it high level to make sure to fit everything in. It's usually about an hour long talk, so thanks for sticking with me through that. Any questions? Cool. Oh, you got one? All right. Any favorite books or resources? Yeah, there's a book called, I think it's Hacking Web Apps. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's got like the picture of the key, like the old skeleton key on the front of it. There are so many resources on YouTube, and if you just Google hacking web apps or Burp Suite Pro or any of the tools that I've mentioned, you'll find so many free videos and walkthroughs to help you sort of master those applications. All right, thanks everyone for listening, and again, come see me if you have any questions. Thank you.